guys, what's up? Welcome back. My name is Daniela. I'm so happy that you're here and happy almost spring. We are getting there. The sun is finally shining. We've been getting a lot of rain, which has been great because it's like melting away all the snow, and I feel like I'm defrosting. I feel like I'm slowly coming back to life. So I thought it would be really fun today to chat about some books that I think are perfect for reading in the springtime months. So hopefully you can find some new books to add to your TBR over the coming months. And then I also wanted to talk about a few books that I am hoping to read over the next few months. I feel like spring is such a fun reading season. Everything feels so fresh and new and fun. So let's just get right into the book. The first recommendation that I have for you is the book that I've read the most recently and one that I am very excited about. This book just came out a few weeks ago and it is called The Rose Bargain. This book is basically like, think Bridgerton meets The Cruel Prince, and I loved every second of it. So in The Rose Bargain, we're following Ivy. Ivy is coming into her first dating season. So we're in Regency England. However, the Queen of England is actually a fairy queen. So she has come many hundreds of years ago and she kind of defeated the King of England and she has become the eternal Queen of England. So every year, all of the new girls coming into the season will present themselves to the Queen, and they are allowed to ask her for one wish and she will grant them their wish in exchange for something random. So most girls will use this little wish, this bargain, to find a good suitor in the season. So they'll ask to have like a more defined jawline, or they'll ask to have longer fingers so they can play the piano forte. And often the queen in exchange will like remove a piece of their pinky finger, or they like won't have any toenails or something. It's just like silly little things. So that is basically how the dating season has worked all of these years. And then, except for this year, this is Ivy's first year, and the queen has decided that it is time for her son, the only other fairy in all of the land, it is time for her son to find a wife. And so she decides to hold this competition where a bunch of girls enter. And so Ivy enters the competition because she's trying to figure out, a couple of years ago, it was her sister's first season. Her sister made a deal that she doesn't remember, and it's kind of ruined her life, and it's ruined like their family and their reputation. And so Ivy is just trying to figure out what happened with her sister and how can she fix things. I feel like that was a very long-winded explanation, and like that is really just like the first few pages of what happens, but the whole book is so good. It is like the Regency era stuff is so good, like the balls, the parties, the dresses, the vibes, everything is spot on. The romance, the yearning, the tension, the banter, like everything so good. I do think this is the start of a series. This is the first book. Obviously it just came out a few weeks ago, but I think you can definitely read it without the other books having come out yet. I just love this one. I know it's going to be such a popular book going forward, and I think spring is the perfect time to read it because I just feel like spring and Regency go together so well. But yeah, I feel like everyone has been eating this book up as it's been coming out, myself included. I think it's totally worth the read and perfect for the spring season. Okay, the next book on my list is A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting. If you've been here before to my channel, probably heard me talk about this book before, but it is one of my top 5 books probably of all time. I love this book so much. This is another Regency romance, but this is an adult romance, and this is about Kitty, and Kitty has 4 or 5 siblings, I believe, and both of her parents have passed away and left their family in a mountain of debt. And so now Kitty has decided to enter the London season and try to find a suitor, try to find a husband that can pay off all of their family's debts so that her sisters have a chance to marry for love in the future and they don't lose their home. So Kitty is essentially a fortune hunter, and she is trying to find the wealthiest person that she can, that like her status will allow her to find, without them figuring out that she is just in it for the money and she's just in it to save her family. So she meets a young man who is absolutely smitten with her, and she's like perfect. He's got a lot of money. He'll be able to take very good care of me. I'm not interested in finding a love match. Like, that's just not my priority. I know that it's not realistic. I know it's not gonna happen. So she's kind of pursuing this guy who she thinks is interested in her and can provide for her family. And then his brother finds out that they're like in this courtship, and he can see right through Kitty. He's like, oh no, like she is here just for the fortune. She is not here because she loves my brother. She is not interested in my brother at all, and I am not going to let this happen. So we have kind of like a little tension, a little enemy situation, woman. Kitty is pursuing this relationship hard, and the brother is trying to stop this relationship hard, and they're kind of working against each other. But yeah, this book is just so sweet and fun, and it's genuinely just like a delightful read. I think it's perfect for this time of year. The London season and like the Regency vibes always just bring such springtime vibes, I think, and this is one that I am really looking forward to reading again this year. I think about it all the time still, and I'm really excited to come back to it, and I highly recommend. Next, I have a little cozy mystery for you, and that is Shady Hollow by Juno Block. This is actually the first in the start of a series. I've only read this one, so I don't know what the rest of the books in the series are like, but I love this book so much. This is about a village called Shady Hollow, and it follows a bunch of woodland creatures that live in this little village. And at the very beginning of the book, this old curmudgeonly frog has been murdered, and so this fox here, Vera, she's a reporter, and no one really cares about the death of this frog because they're like, he was old and he was grumpy, like good riddance. But she's decided she is going to figure out what happened, why he got murdered, did he get murdered? We don't know, and who did it. And so we follow all of these talking creatures, talking animals, and all of their dramas in the forest, and it's just so sweet and so fun. The cover is so springy and so foresty. The nature writing is so good. It's very like quirky and silly, but the mystery is actually written so well. I did not know what was gonna happen, where we were gonna go. It was shocking, it was surprising, and it was just so much fun, and I think it's the perfect spring read. That is Shady Hollow. Okay, I have one more cozy mystery recommendation, and this one is definitely on the sillier side of the spectrum, but I do feel like it's kind of a fun spring book, and that is Finlay Donovan is Killing It. This is a book about Finlay Donovan, and she is a mystery writer, and one day she's meeting for coffee with her agent or her editor or someone, I think, and she's talking about the plot of her next mystery book, and someone overhears her and assumes that they're talking about actually committing murder. And so this woman assumes that Finlay Donovan is a hitman for hire, and Finlay's like, no, I'm just an author, I'm not a hitman. And the lady's like, no, like, I need you to murder my husband, I need you to do that. And she's like, no, I don't do that. Like, that's not what I do in real life. But then she kind of winds up in this like ridiculous situation where she is kind of caught in the middle of this scenario with that woman's husband that she meets at the coffee shop. It is so outlandish, it's so silly. Like, you definitely have to suspend your belief for a lot of this book, but it is a good time. Like, I think it's so fun if you need a palate cleanser book. I know that this is also a series. I have not continued on with this series because this was like pretty silly for me. I enjoyed the one, and I think I'm good with that, but I know a lot of people do enjoy the rest of the series, and I think there's a new one that just came out recently. So if you end up enjoying Finlay Donovan, we've also got a whole bunch more book recommendations from the rest of the series. Okay, now let's talk about a few more romances. I feel like it wouldn't be spring if we didn't talk about the When in Rome series from Sarah Adams. I only have the second one here, so that's the one I'll hold up, but I feel like this one is the most springy anyways. When in Rome is about Amelia, and Amelia is like this really big famous pop star, and she's just trying to get away from all of the hustle and the drama one day, so she decides to drive to a small town and just have a little escape. But then her car breaks down outside of someone's house, and she's freaking out, and then the guy comes out and he kind of like saves her and lets her stay in his house while he fixes her car. And this whole book is kind of like set in the backdrop of this very small town called Rome, Kentucky. And I cannot remember what the guy's name is, but he like owns a pie shop, and she ends up staying in the small town a little bit longer. They get to know each other. It's a very sweet romance. And then the second book is about his sister and her bodyguard. And so the sister, her name is Annie, she owns a flower shop. She's very like young and innocent and very sweet. The vibes, like, it's still in that same small town, and the vibes are so good. I'm sure you've heard of these books, at least if you haven't read them. I think they're perfect for this time of year because they're just nice and light and very springy. There's lots of flowers, there's lots of like sweet small town moments that are really good. And the third book in the series just came out recently, and it's about the other sister in their family. Then we have The Switch by Beth O'Leary. This book is about Lena, and Lena has just gone through a very disastrous work presentation. A bunch of things are going wrong at work, and so she gets kind of put on this forced sabbatical where she has to take a couple of months off. At the same time, her grandma has just been going through a breakup. She kind of wants to get back out there. She wants to go on the dating scene, but she lives in this very small Yorkshire village in England, and she knows everyone there, you know? She needs a change of scenery. So Lena and her grandma, Eileen, decide to swap places, and Lena goes and lives in her small town for a few months, and she's just gonna take a break from the hustle and bustle of the city. And then Eileen moves into Lena's flat in downtown London, and she's going on her own adventure to try and find a new suitor, a new love interest. This book is very sweet. I love like the dual perspectives of the grandma and the granddaughter. I love their relationship. They each get to like get a taste of what the other's life is like and get to know their communities and get to know the people that they interact with and talk with every single day. So it like bonds them as grandma and granddaughter, which I think is really sweet. And then there's also some really sweet romances and great relationships, and I think it's just a really fun springy book. The next book that I wanted to put on my spring recommendation list is Lease on Love by Fallon Ballard. I feel like this book was very popular when it came out a few years ago. I don't really hear much more about it now. Back when it first came out and I first read it, I really enjoyed it. This book is about Sadie and Jack, and Sadie is up for a promotion at her work that's like much needed, much overdue. She's doing a lot there and she's not getting a lot of recognition, and her rent is very expensive because she lives in New York City. Then she gets passed by for this promotion and she's kind of reeling, she's very upset, and so she decides to go for a drink with her friends and kind of lament. And then while she's out drinking, she pulls up her phone and she thinks she's on a dating app, and she's like swiping through because she just wants to like meet someone. Instead, what she's actually on is like a house finding app, like a roommate finder or something like that. So she swipes onto Jack's profile and she's like, perfect. And so she goes to his house because she thinks they're gonna like meet up and have a one night stand or something. And he opens the door and he's like, hey, this is the roommate finder app. Anyways, it's like a very strange meet cute. However, Jack kind of graciously lets her move into a spare room in his Brooklyn brownstone, and they become roommates. And Sadie is like kind of shocked at how unbelievably inexpensive the rent is here, because Jack, it seems, doesn't really need the money and this house is absolutely gorgeous. And so she ends up quitting her job and starting her dream career, which she's always wanted to do, and she starts a flower shop. So Sadie is working on her flower shop, she's working on building her business. Jack is just kind of feeling and recovering and processing the loss of his parents that passed away pretty suddenly and unexpectedly, and so he's going through a lot of grief. And Sadie is in this new period of life and they're just living together, kind of getting to know each other, building up a friendship, and it's very, very sweet. It's just like a fun, no thoughts romance that is very springy. All of the flowers, all of like the Brooklyn spring summer vibes I thought were really, really good, and it's just not one that I think is talked about very often, but is one that is worth the read, I think. Another book that I feel like is so perfect for spring and so perfect for this time of year is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a teeny little novella. It's so short, it's like a one-sit read, and it is so wonderfully written. This is a sci-fi and it follows a monk and a robot, and it's in this world where humans built and created robots, and then the robots gained consciousness and they realized we're not actually doing anything to benefit the humans, like we're kind of deteriorating their lifestyle. And so all of the robots leave and they move to this other part of the world where they're like living amongst themselves and they have their own little area and the humans are not interacting with them. Then the tea monk decides to go on a journey, like a soul searching journey, and runs into a robot that's decided to come back to humanity and see if he can help the humans in any way. So the two of them go on this journey and it's very sweet. The like scenery and nature writing is really beautiful, and it's just like a hopeful tale of the future that's like a warm hug, a warm cup of tea, that like the stakes are very low, but it is very comforting and very sweet. This book is a duology. I think it's part of a duology. I haven't read the second one yet, but I do want to, because I've heard that the second one is even better and it just like ties the whole story together really, really beautifully. This is just a sweet, soft book. If you've never read sci-fi before, I don't really read it at all, but it was a pretty easy world to get into and perfect for a season of new life and freshness. Another book I think that is perfect and so fun for this time of year, this is definitely like the strange book of the list, but that is The Husbands. This book came out last year and I listened to the audiobook during the spring of last year, so maybe that's why I associate it with spring. This book is about Lauren, and one night Lauren comes back from her best friend's bachelorette party, and she comes back to her little apartment, and there's a man in her apartment, and she doesn't have a boyfriend. She's not in a relationship with anyone, but this man is in her apartment and knows everything about her, knows her really well, and seems to live there. And she's like, who is this person? How did he get here? Like, how much did I have to drink tonight? This is so weird. And so she's just kind of reeling. She goes onto her phone and she realizes, oh, I'm married to this guy. How do I not remember getting married? Like, how do I not know this person? And so she goes through and she kind of is like putting together some context clues and figuring out that he's her husband, or she's her husband, he's her whatever. She's kind of figuring out their relationship. And then the next day she needs him to get something up in the attic, or he needs to go up to the attic, and so he goes up there to grab something, and when he comes down it's a whole different husband. And so Lauren realizes that her attic is suddenly magical and is feeding her husbands, and so she decides she's gonna have some fun with this, and if she doesn't like one, she sends him back up and waits for the next one. And so she's like serial dating, but like she's already married to all of these people. This book is so quirky and so silly, but it actually is really sweet and fun. I do feel like we got a little bit lost in the middle there, but I still think it's worth the read. I had no idea how the author was gonna like tie in the ending and finish this book because it's such a strange concept, but I think she did it really well actually. I had a lot of fun with this book, and it's just something that's different that you definitely, it's not a plot that you read very often at all, but I do think that it's worth the read. I think it's a lot of fun. If you're looking for like a slower, more character-driven literary fiction book for the springtime, I want to recommend Riders and Lovers by Lily King. This is the kind of book where I almost DNF'd it in the first half because I was like, this is so boring. There is nothing going on. But it is so slow and lyrical and honestly just really beautiful. By the second half, I was so drawn in and just so addicted to it that I wanted to read the whole thing in one go. You can definitely take your time with this and read it really slowly. This book follows our protagonist, and she is just kind of processing and dealing with the death of her mother. She's just dealing with a lot of grief, and she's at a very low point in her life where nothing is going right. She's really in a rut. She's trying to become a writer. All she wants is to become an author, but it's just not going well for her, and she's stuck in this serving job to make money that she absolutely hates. She's living in this old rundown place that it's just, it's not safe for her, it's not taking care of her, and she's just in a really tough spot. And this book is just so, like, there is so little plot. It's so just character driven, but the story was so beautiful. Like, I remember reading it, I remember it so fondly when I think back on it, and I can't even tell you more than that of like what it's about. But if you like that kind of like slow character study kind of book, this one is so good. The ending was just beautiful. Lily King is such a masterful writer. Like, the writing in this book is truly incredible, and like I think you do have to be in the right headspace for it, but if you are, like, definitely give this one a shot. Okay, a couple more lit ficky ones. I have The Secret Book of Flora. This book I just read back in January, and this is about Hazel and Flora, and they are sisters and they grow up in World War II, and so they live in London with their mom, but they get sent away for the Pied Piper program, I think is what it's called. They kind of get sent to this small town where they live in this cottage with a mother and her son, and they live this like beautiful idyllic life in the landscape of the war as children. And then Flora mysteriously goes missing one day and they never find her again. So this book is set in two timelines. You get like the then timeline of their time during World War II, and then there's a now timeline that is set in the, I think it's like in the 1960s, where Hazel, her sister, is just trying to move on and get on with her life. She's never really been able to get over the loss of her younger sister. It's obviously very deeply affected her throughout her whole life. And Hazel's actually at the last day of her work. She works in a rare bookstore, and her last project, her last book that she has to assess for the rare bookstore before she can leave, is this story that is called Whisperwood. And Hazel opens the book and she's like, oh my gosh, like this is my story. Her and Flora used to have this secret world called Whisperwood, where the river was made of stars and they were like magical animals and they could fly around, and it was just a secret world for just the two of them. She never told another soul about it in her life, and yet somehow someone had discovered this story and turned it into a book. And so this kind of like upends Hazel's life, and she's like, oh my goodness, like Flora must still be out there. Like how did this person discover this story? What's going on? And so it kind of goes on this journey of this mystery, and it's just like a beautiful tale of sisterhood and growing up and grief and life. And I just love Patty Callahan Henry. I think her writing is excellent. I think her stories are really good, and this one was a very fun one. So then I want to recommend to you If We're Being Honest by Kat Shook. This book came out a couple of years ago. I absolutely loved it. This book is set in a small town in Georgia, and the very opening pages talk about, it's like this big huge southern family, and they're all preparing for the patriarch, the grandfather's funeral, and they're all kind of going over like, well, this person could not give the eulogy because of this problem, and this person could not give the eulogy because they're like this. It's just not a good idea. And so it's kind of debating every single member of the family and who's gonna give the eulogy for the grandfather who has passed away. And in the end, they settle on the grandfather's best friend is going to give the eulogy. Then they go to the funeral, and at the eulogy, the grandfather's best friend is kind of freaking out, and he then confesses to everyone, oh, actually, like, me and this guy, we weren't just friends. We've secretly been having an affair all of these years, and we're actually really deeply in love. And so this sends the whole family reeling. It's like a Southern Baptist family in Georgia. And the whole family is like, okay, like what? And so now there's this whole new backdrop. Not only are they grieving their grandfather who they knew and loved, but they're also realizing maybe they actually didn't know him at all. So this is also a very character-driven story. It changes between perspectives of a lot of the characters in the families, a lot of the siblings, the grandchildren, the grandma, but I think it was really, really well done. It's one that is very, very slow, but then the end just kind of ties it all together, and I really liked this one. Kat Shook came out with another book, I think last year. That one didn't really do it for me, but this one I thought was really, really good. Okay, I've got just a couple more for you. Next, I want to talk about The Sweet Spot. Look at this cover, like it's just so springy. This book is so springy to me. It actually takes place over the course of like a full year, I think, but I think it starts in the spring, and so that's why I associate it with the spring. I must have read it in the spring as well. This book, I don't want to give too much away because the plot is very silly. I don't even know how to explain this book. It seems so silly. I think it's definitely worth going and looking up and reading the synopsis, but basically it's centered around this like very cool old New York brownstone, and there are 3 women. One of them is an artist, one of them is just like a young girl who's trying to figure out her next move, figure out her career, and the third is like a grouchy like school secretary, I think. They happen to all cross paths, and then a baby kind of like lands in their laps between the 3 of them. None of them are the mother of this baby. They actually don't know whose baby it is or where the baby came from, but they all kind of like are trying to take care of it and keep it alive and figure out where the baby came from, whose baby it is, how do they get it back to its mother. The New York City vibes are fantastic. The writing, Amy Duvel is such a good writer. The story is like it sounds really silly and ridiculous. It's actually like a very well written, like it's jokey, but it's also fairly serious and fairly straightforward. There's a lot of just like family drama, relationship dynamics, like real true to life issues that you can relate to in a lot of these characters, and so you really feel for them and you really enjoy it. I think like the main thing that I remember taking away from this book, the main thing that I remember when I was reading it, is that whenever I would put it down, I would just think about it all the time, and I felt myself like yearning to be with these characters. I really, really love the characters that Amy Duvel created in this world. They're just so well fleshed out, their dynamics, their relationship. I just wanted to know what was gonna happen. I wanted to know more, and I just wanted to like spend my time with them, and I think that's a very good sign when you're reading a book. The very last book on my list is for my Jane Austen girlies, and that is Emma of 83rd Street. I love the story of Emma so much. I grew up like being obsessed with Clueless. That was like one of my favorite movies as a kid and in high school. I loved the 2020 Emma adaptation, and I really liked this book, Emma of 83rd Street. So this book follows a modern day Manhattanite, very, very wealthy Emma, and she's just Emma. Like Emma is spoiled and she is annoying, but she's so lovable and quirky and fun. If you know vaguely the story of Emma, then you kind of know where the story is gonna go. But it's such a fun, like, modern twist on the book because it's set in like modern day New York City with modern day problems and modern day designers. Everything is just really well written. And if you like a Jane Austen retelling, this is one that I don't see very often talked about, but I think it's a fun one. Okay, those are all of my recommendations for spring books. Now I wanted to get into talking about some of the books that are on my personal TBR in the spring. What is a new season without a big old list of TBR books? First set of books that I want to talk about that I really want to read this spring are my Jane Austen collection. I have never read a Jane Austen book before in my life, so I'm not sure which book I'm gonna start with here, but I really want to get to one of these. I feel like even just from this video, you can tell that I'm a big Regency romance lover, and so I feel like it's time that I finally read the OG source inspiration. And so I'm not sure which one of these books I'm gonna start with, but I definitely want to read a Jane Austen book this spring. The next book on my TBR is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaffer. I've had this on my TBR for so long, and it's actually on my March TBR, so I'm going to be reading it this month. But this book feels so magical and springy. I've talked about it so many times before, so I'm not gonna get into it. I feel like it's gonna be such a fun read, and so like, I feel like a little spring magic. Just definitely the vibe. I also really am so excited to read Tom Lake this spring. This is Anne Patchett's most recent novel. It came out a few years ago now, but this is about a mother and her daughters. It's set at like their family cherry farm, so it just feels so springy, and it's set during the pandemic, but the mom is telling her daughters about her youth and her time with a very famous actor, I think in New York City, and it's just all about the mother and the daughter relationships and the mom's past, and it sounds so wonderful. I think Anne Patchett can do no wrong in my eyes. All of her books are so incredibly well written, and I am really excited for this one. I've had this one, I got it last spring and I never got around to it, so I'm so excited to get to it this spring. Last on my physical TBR, I have Dear Mr. Knightley by Catherine Ray. This book I've talked about a couple of times, but Catherine Ray is like one of my comfort authors. I didn't talk about this in my recommendations video, but I reread her Winsome series every single spring, but it is called The Printed Letter Bookshop, and I love that book so much. It's just such a comfort book to me. I don't think objectively it's like the best book ever, but I love it so much, and it is the perfect spring book. I read it pretty much every single spring. I will say that it does have a bit of like, I think the author is like Catholic maybe, so she does have like a little bit of like, there's like a priest as one of the characters, and they talk about like Bible verses and stuff a lot, so if you're interested in reading that, kind of be aware of that going into it. There's a fair bit of like Bible references and stuff, but it's just such a cozy, comforting book about a group of women, and I just love that so much. And so I'm really excited to read another book by her. This, I believe, is her first release, and this is about Sam, who is trying to go to grad school, but she can't afford it, and then someone kind of sponsors or like pays for her tuition, and in exchange the anonymous tuition payer just asks that she writes them letters and kind of shares her experiences, and the person calls himself Mr. Knightley, and so she writes to this Mr. Knightley and kind of recalls her experiences in university. I also have one Regency romance on my list. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get to this one because it's not available at my library, so we'll see if I can find it, but it is called Mr. Malcolm's List. I know that it's a Regency romance and I know absolutely nothing else about it, but I heard from, I think it was like Darling Desi in one of her spring videos, she absolutely loved this book so much, and so I really want to give it a try. And then of course spring and April is like peak new release season. I feel like there are so many new books coming out that I'm so excited for. I'm just going to talk about two because I can make a whole separate video on spring new releases. There are so many good ones. But of course the new Emily Henry book will be coming out in April, and I will be sat for that. I am so excited. I've loved every single Emily Henry book. I truly haven't disliked any of them, and I feel like this one's gonna be a little bit different, have a bit of a different vibe, but I'm here for it and I'm ready. And then the other new release book is actually comes out the same day as the Emily Henry book and is probably my other most anticipated book of the year. I forgot to put it on my 25 for 2025, which I'm so upset about, but I'm so excited for it. It is called Ordinary Time by Annie B. Jones. Annie is a bookstore owner. She has a small little independent bookstore in a tiny little town in Georgia, and we actually had the pleasure of going to visit there last year, and it was so magical and so special. Annie was so kind and so sweet. All of the staff there were so nice to us and just took really good care of us. I have been following Annie for a long time. I follow her personally on Instagram. I also listen to her podcast for the bookstore, and I think she's so wise. She's so sweet and funny, and I'm really looking forward. This is her first book. It's a collection of essays, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm probably gonna do this one on audio because she's such a good podcaster, so I think it's gonna be a great audio experience. This book and the Emily Henry book both come out on the same day, and that's gonna be like Christmas for me. Like, that is a national holiday, in my opinion. I am so ready. I'm so excited. I think it's gonna be a great spring with this and all the other books. It's gonna be a great spring reading season. I hope it'll be the same for you. I hope that you've found at least 1 or 2 books that you're interested in adding to your TBR. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you have planned for your spring reading. I'd love to chat with you in the comments. Thank you so much for being here. I love ya, and I will hopefully see you for the next one. Bye.